Siyo from the Rez. I'm Kinley.
And I'm Colton.
And this is Cherokee Nation's official podcast.
You wash the Dietland, they could do our tashi dolan.
We've got the VIPs in the studio today. Our guests are Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. and Todd Enlow, the Executive Director of Housing Programs here at the Cherokee Nation.
Chief Hoskin served on the Council of the Cherokee Nation and was Secretary of State under the Baker administration before being elected Principal Chief in 2019. Chief Hoskin and his family originally hail from the sprawling metropolis of Veneta, and a Cherokee County boy, Todd Enlow, has been with the Cherokee Nation. Started his journey in 1993 and has had many roles, all with a focus on helping our Cherokee citizens.
Welcome to the pod, Chief Hoskin and Todd Enlow.
Well, do.
So, Chief, I have to ask, after 6 years, have people finally got your last name right?
They haven't. They're getting close, though. I can feel it. That S is going to be dropped anytime now. But you did well on the intro, so that's great.
So it'll be Hawkins?
Is there a favorite or a most memorable way someone has mispronounced your last name?
Yeah, there is a favorite, and it's engraved on a BB gun that was gifted to me by a fine institution, and it says Chunk Hodgkins Jr. And it wasn't a joke so far as I know, but it certainly made us all laugh, and that was early on. That was probably 2020.
We love all the updates on your chickens and your garden.
Right.
Like you said, not financially viable, but something that helps take the edge off. How's life on the Hoskin family homestead?
It's good. I wouldn't say it's a sustainable operation, other than it sustains me psychologically because I can go garden when weather permits and sort of put some other things aside or think of some things in a way that maybe I couldn't before because it's just a better environment if you're planting and harvesting and taking care of chickens and not getting attacked by your rooster. All those things are really good for one's well-being, I think.
Hey, it teaches you how to duck and dodge, and you probably need that a little bit in this profession.
You do. It's good training.
Do you have names for your chickens, or are you...
Well, Howl is the name of our rooster. We don't really have names for the three hens. And Howl, my daughter, Jazzy, named him because she loves this show called Howl's Moving Castle. She just loves this show. She had me watch it one time. It was a really great show. And so, because I always wondered why she called the rooster Howl, and that's why. So we have a name for the rooster, and the hens are just, the hens. So.
Craig County and Veneta are pretty special in the history of the state and the Cherokee Nation. Can you tell us about growing up in Veneta?
Yeah, that's where my family lived since probably close to its founding. I mean, like all of our ancestors, our Cherokee ancestors, they came here in the 19th century and different paths, whether it's forced removal or on the Trail of Tears or the removal that happened before then with the old settlers. We all have different ways that our family got here, but all a act of the United States pushing Cherokees across the map. But my family settled in Veneta long ago, and so I can go back and look at old newspaper clippings that reference my great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather living in the area. So Veneta is very special to me in that regard. It's a little town, like a lot of little towns across the reservation, and in some ways it had some setbacks economically, but it's special to me. I think, figures in interestingly in Cherokee history in that it came about at a time when the Cherokee Nation was under a lot of pressure from things going on after the Civil War from the United States, pressure going on from settlers. The railroad coming through the Cherokee Nation was really consequential.
What's your go-to order at Clanton's?
Go-to order at Clanton's is not calf fries, as much as I might boast about that and claim to eat them. I'll just chop up pieces of chicken fried steak and show those and say, look, I'm setting the record here. Theoretically, I could set the record. No, I love the hamburgers probably most of all.
It's a classic.
Yeah. And you also have ties to Adair County as well.
I do have ties to Adair County. I had a great-grandfather, Ned Hoskin, at one point went by Hoskin, who lived both in Veneta and then in Adair County and in Going Snake. He had a dry goods store, and, it's always fun to do research on your family. And when I stumbled across an advertisement for his dry goods store, it was really interesting, and it showed me that Adair County roots in a real way. And so Mulberry Hollow is the community where he lived and some of my other relatives lived.
Nice. And Todd, to you, Cherokee County boy, what was it like growing up here in Cherokee County?
I grew up down in a little community called Keys, which we were just there last week. But I grew up down Indian Road, so much like Chief stated, the family allotment that we had after removal is actually under the lake at Carter's Landing, the original.
Oh, wow.
And so I grew up on what was considered our replacement allotment there in Keys. And so I grew up next to my cousins. As a kid, I didn't like living out in the country because I was far removed from activities and other friends. So I got pretty close to my cousins. My parents both worked in town or out of town. And so my sister and I probably burned up the phones as we were little, wanting to know exactly when Mom and Dad were going to get home after the 9-mile walk uphill in the snow.
Was that when they had party lines?
It was, actually. Yeah, we had a party line. My cousins and my aunt, we fought over who actually got access to the phone more than once. But I grew up on that, and a lot of people don't believe this about me, but I grew up on a farm and been on the wrong side of too many cows and too many horses. And I've shown cows and I've shown horses and hauled hay, chopped ice at 2 in the morning and 10 at night, and I learned a lot of my work ethic from my parents, obviously. And when I think about where I grew up, it's a lot about family because it was our immediate family and first cousins that were close by, and it's how we spent a lot of our time together.
So growing up around here, how have you seen the progress that Cherokee Nation has been making since then to now?
I think our growth has been healthy. It's not too much that it causes too much of a burden. Obviously right now we have a lot of construction in Tahlequah, and there are some growing pains associated with that. But I felt like our growth has been moderate and it's been measured. All of the things that I've seen us grow into are for the good. It's not diminished my life here. It's been pretty impressive to watch, but it's also been impressive from a standpoint that it's not been a burden to the residents in the area.
And Cherokee Nation is right at the heart of it. I feel like we have a lot of, we're behind the community here in Tahlequah, and a lot of our growth is because of us. And I think that's really speaks to our leadership.
And Chief, as you talked to some of our longtime employees, you toddled in here as just a wee lad, and you've been around for a while. What's the biggest change that you've seen?
Well, I think the biggest change I've seen is just the growth of systems that have been in place but been growing exponentially. I mean, our health system, the growth of our health system is really hard to overstate. And those of us, including everyone here, who've used it or seen it over the years can see the growth. But as we're living our lives every day, and there's an OSU medical school, which Todd has mentioned, and we've got the hospital, which is under construction right now, and look, the outpatient facility here, which is the biggest in Indian country, the doors haven't been open too many years. All this is happening very fast. So I think the sheer growth is what I've seen change the most. The other part of the growth, though, is the geographic spread of the Cherokee Nation. So I've mentioned that I grew up and lived in Veneta, which is an hour and a half north of Tahlequah. I've had time living here in Tahlequah the last 5 years, and so this is a great community. But I can tell you in the past, say, decade, maybe even further back than that, the geographic reach of the Cherokee Nation is so much more than it was when I was a kid. So you can go to these towns like Veneta and Oshaleta, and you can see health centers that are really the state-of-the-art facilities that they ought to be. And they're in those communities. You can see offices for career services and human services. You can see different programs at the community level that are in all these communities, and that's really good, and that's the kind of growth that we need, is growth that's throughout the reservation.
Was there a pivotal moment or an event in your life that made you say, okay, I want to work for my tribe, or I want to serve the Cherokee people?
Well, I can say for me, it was really two things. One was seeing my father was not in politics before 1995, run for council. He ran for council, and it seemed like what he was doing was just the right thing to do, like the way he was running and going door to door and just saying he wanted to help people. And then seeing him help people when he got into that office, that was really powerful for me. So by seeing him elected, like people can do this. Like we still live in a world in which you can be somebody that just wants to contribute. It doesn't have to be politics or elected office in the Cherokee Nation, which is what's so beautiful about the Cherokee Nation. I mean, Todd and I both work with people who aren't in politics, but they do amazing things in whatever capacity they're working in. And so that was really powerful for me to see my father. The other thing was just talking to my wife, trying to decide if I should run for office, and just listening to her talk about, you want to make a difference in the world. You can do it in your tribe. And so I had two people in my family who showed me and sort of told me, you can do this, in some way serve. And those really two moments I'll never forget. And that would be about 1995, and then about 2007 is when those two things happened.
What about you, Mr. Enlow?
I was in college at NSU, and I thought, if there's this job opportunity, I'm going to take it, and I want to get a little bit of experience. And so I thought, I'll take this job at Cherokee Nation. I'm going to work there for about 18 months, and then I'm going to move on to bright lights in big cities. And so that first week, I went to the Office of Environmental Services and opened up the door thinking that they were going to be waiting there for me with open arms and saying, "Oh, thank God you're here, Todd." And what I was greeted with was, "Oh, hey, yeah, we've got to send somebody to this legal history class, and none of us want to go. So you're the new guy. Report there for the rest of the week." And I thought, well, this is not going exactly the way I expected. But in that week, I learned more about our Cherokee history and culture, and from the perspective of the legal history and what our ancestors fought for on so many different levels. And I went through a full range of emotions in that 5 days. From the standpoint, at one point in time, I was disgusted, and the other, I was somewhat ashamed, and then I was mad, and I was fighting mad. And then by the end of that session, I was just happy to be a Cherokee and proud to work at Cherokee Nation. And so what happened in that week is it shifted my focus from wanting to work here for about 18 months to now here I'm on my 32nd year of working at the Cherokee Nation. And then, Chief got 2. I'm going to take 2 as well. The second one was, I served as Chief of Staff with Chief and Deputy, and I didn't really know both of those gentlemen as well as I do now, obviously, because we've worked together pretty closely on a lot of work. I knew Chief when he was on council, but only at a distance. And then Deputy, when he was on his time on the council, our interactions were pretty limited. But, during COVID, we had a whole myriad of projects and activities and trying to make sure that people were safe, and it weighed on me pretty heavily. I was under a lot of stress, and so I went to Chief and Deputy, and I said, I just don't think I can do this any longer for my mental health. And they were supportive through that whole process. And, I felt bad because I was leaving a team and partners and some of the stuff I was working on, and I felt like I was letting them down. But they were super supportive. And then about a year later, they pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we know you moved to Arizona, but we thought you'd come back. How about now?" I looked at Chief and Deputy and said, I left for a reason, right? And they said, "Yeah, we're 100%, and we want to be protective of that." And so, that was a lot from not only the standpoint of a friend, but also as an employee, to have your chief and your deputy care for your well-being enough to make sure that they want to protect it, and as much as I do. And so those were the 2 points in mind. One was starting here, and then the second was that support and action that they both took, not only in words, but also in physical action.
Well, Chief, I know it seems like a lifetime ago now, but let's picture it's August 2019. You're on stage about to take the oath of office. What's going through your mind, and where are you seeing your administration heading?
Part of what was going through my mind was the menu of sort of challenges and opportunities seemed really big, but as we would find in the course of the next year or more, it was a lot smaller than it ended up being because of just the consequence of circumstances and the pandemic and all of those things that attended that thing that really shifted. But first of all, I was just beyond amazed and grateful that I could be in the position to be chief of the Cherokee Nation. But then the things that we were looking at, one of the most important things, maybe the most important thing to me, was housing, trying to do something with housing and seeing if we could get that done. I had a little sense that a guy named Governor Kevin Stitt might not be seeing completely eye to eye with me and other leaders of the Cherokee Nation, because we had heard some things about the gaming compact. So I thought, well, that might be a little bit of a bump in the road with this governor, who himself was fairly new. But I also thought there's tremendous possibility here to do something on housing. We were already going in a great direction on health care. I thought we could keep moving there. And then there were just a host of sort of grassroots things that I hoped we could do with community organizations. And so that's where my mind was, and I'm glad we've gotten some things done on those scores and a lot of other things that really were revealed by the pandemic, and then opportunities created by some resources attending the pandemic, related to the pandemic. Of course, the worst thing at all is that we lost people during the pandemic, and that's something that certainly none of us were thinking about on that day in August.
Talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, that leads me into my next question. Chief, you were only in office for 6 months, and then boom, the largest public health crisis in the last century happens. Tell me your initial thoughts when you knew COVID could make its way to our res, and what did those first conversations look like?
Well, those first conversations with the gentleman that I'm on the show with here, who is Todd Enlow, and he was watching it intently, and I don't mean to speak for him, but I knew he was watching it, not just reading the news like we're all consuming, but really looking at the data that was available. And Todd Enlow is one of those guys that if he's worried, then I better be worried. And when I could tell Todd Enlow was worried, then I knew I needed to be more worried. I tended to be, at that time, maybe like a lot of Americans were, which is, this seems bad, but how bad can it be? I've never seen anything like this in our lifetime, as it turned out, and so I just didn't anticipate that it would grip us the way it did from a health perspective, economically. The things that I had going for me, at least, were this. I had people around me that weren't like Todd Enlow, like people in our public health department, a lot of people dealing in infectious disease. They all knew and were paying attention. That showed me a real strength of the Cherokee Nation. We already had some systems and people in place that, even though we never knew COVID was coming, no one did, we were equipped to at least tell people like me, this is a problem and you should be worried. The other thing that I think I had going for me was knowing what I didn't know, and knowing I need to listen to people like Todd Enlow and Dr. Stephen Jones and Lisa Pivick, and people that deal in infectious disease, Dr. Gann, who helped lead our way through a lot of this. I also thought we ought to be listening to people who know science and deal in facts. There's other leaders that did that, and I think did well. There's some leaders in the country who didn't do that and seemed to be stubbornly against it. So if anything, I hope I benefited us by falling in the camp of people who said, I'm in politics, not in science, but there's a lot of people in science. I don't deal in data. People like Todd Enlow deal in data. Better listen to them. So, but my first thoughts were, I probably underestimated it, but I was glad I had people who were focused on it, and I could at least adapt quickly to listen to them.
Yeah. I do want to commend you guys both, because that was whenever we really went full force with social media. Yeah. And that was how our citizens were learning about COVID and what's happening in the world and what it looks like here on the res. So I do want to commend you guys about bringing that to the forefront for us to give that to citizens.
Well, you all did great. I mean, we couldn't even catalog the number of ways that you all took what we were wanting to do or to communicate and put it into social media, and using technology to create graphics and content that people could understand. And I think you all saved lives in that regard.
Something that I noticed immediately, I wasn't working for Cherokee Nation when COVID kicked off, but just as a Cherokee Nation citizen and as a tribal citizen in Oklahoma, it seemed like from the get-go, tribes were at the forefront of this response. What do you accredit that to? Not only Cherokee Nation, but I know other tribes within Oklahoma were also fighting that front.
I'm really interested in Todd's answer to this, because he was really on the forefront. But what I would just say to preface that is our government, our civil society, our culture, all seems to be oriented, it seems to me, historically and today, when we're at our best, towards making sure we put the community ahead of ourselves, that we see ourselves as a collective, that we've got this shared history, and that there's been times when our ancestors have been up against the ropes and targeted for termination. And it seems like when the going gets tough for the Cherokee people, we survive by kind of surrounding each other and holding on to each other. That is really what you need in a pandemic, because it's a collective threat, and you can only respond to a collective threat with a collective response. It can't be every person for themselves. And so I think that our government, our culture, our civil society was already oriented towards that response to a massive threat to the collective. And it seems to me we were already positioned to do that. And we were positioned from decades of investment in things like healthcare for everyone who needed access to it. So those things we had going for us. And then we had people that were on the front lines like Todd who could say, this is where we need to go. This is what we need to do.
Ditto. As much as I joke about that, I was going in a pretty similar path. You know, if you look at our history, and I worked on the Remember the Removal bike ride that retraced the Trail of Tears. And actually, there were several times when we were facing COVID, I was replaying those stops along the way, like Rattlesnake Springs and the encampment there, and some of the things that they were facing, and remembering they went to the government and said, hey, you guys are not doing this well. Let us lead some of these initiatives and try to save lives. And that's pretty much parallel to what was going on with COVID. And we just led the way, and realizing that we've been here before, even not in our lifetime, but as a people, we've been here before. And that sense of working together and to take care of one another and provide service to one another. It's been a couple of decades ago now, we did a survey and asking people what kind of work they really wanted to do. And what rose to the top was not financial bankers, even though that there are some of those out there that prefer to do that. But the majority of the work that Cherokees want to do is service related. It's either in healthcare or education, but ultimately it's about taking care of one another. And so I knew that we were going to do well in our response at that point in time when you think about it from that historical perspective. And then I think just paying attention to the science and looking at the data, trying to turn that cube around so you can see it from a different perspective and think about, different ways to try and address the needs that we're going to be facing people. A lot of caring employees and people in communities and community organizations. If it wasn't for community organizations, we wouldn't have had the response that we did. And so this was literally one of those efforts where we all work together.
Right. Coming out of COVID, both of you guys worked on a lot of different initiatives, such as like Public Health and Wellness Fund Act. We did the rural connectivity across the Rez. What are some of the initiatives that you're proud of, that you both are proud of?
Well, I'm proud of the whole of it because it was all oriented towards, I think, building long-term strength. But the pandemic, through what was called the CARES Act and then later the American Rescue Plan Act, provided lots of dollars for the Cherokee Nation to do a wide range of things. And so prioritizing housing has meant that we've got new housing additions, that we were able to help people with housing rehab, particularly elders with housing rehab, and a range of other housing issues. You mentioned Public Health and Wellness Fund Act, and that was a measure that sets aside from any federal funds. In fact, it's only tribal funds, and Todd is the architect of that law, which has now generated tens of millions of dollars that we're using to build and operate the wellness centers that are, again, we think and hope and really believe are going to be in the long-term health interest of the Cherokee people. It's going to fund, he and I have been talking a lot lately about, we got to be multifaceted in our approach to communities. So it might be housing, but it's not just housing. It might be outdoor recreation, but it's not just outdoor recreation. It might need a better sense of safety, maybe a presence of the Marshal Service. That means we're leaning on some of these investments. The Housing Jobs Sustainable Communities Act built a lot of community buildings, and it'll build a lot more. The Public Health and Wellness Fund Act will help fund a broad range of things that help people lead healthier lives. And so being able to put dollars into these long-term investments for people in our communities is really important. We've had so many initiatives, I know I've left out some.
And just around the complex here, you can probably look and see 4, 5, 6 construction projects just within eyesight, and all of these happening simultaneously, not to mention all the ones happening around the res. Can you tell everybody, what's going on around here in this area, and was this always part of the vision?
Well, it was always part of the need. I think what's happened is the federal dollars that we've been able to secure for these with the council's support means that we can accelerate things we always needed to do. Now, Todd, you've been around here longer than I have, but I suspect even when you started, you're looking around and you saw office buildings that even then were probably on borrowed time in terms of their usefulness. And we've gotten even more time out of those. So if you come to Tahlequah, if you see us building new government office infrastructure, it's because we've needed to do that for a long time. And it was going to take a long time for us to do that, but those federal dollars are helping us do it quicker. So if you look at the $1 billion in terms of the capital program, most of it's not government buildings, but a lot of it is, and it has to be. We're a growing government. I mean, our population's growing. What we're doing in terms of programs and services is growing. So that's why we have a central office building that's going up where people once knew the restaurant of the Cherokees to be that building. And that's why we've got a new EMS building going up in the area where the current ambulance bays are. That's why we just announced that we've got a new justice center we're going to build, because in the post-McGirt era, you've got to build up the infrastructure of your court system. Government buildings are a part of that $1 billion portfolio. Housing is a big part of that portfolio. So under Todd's leadership, we went through a $120 million housing package. We're now on a $40 million every 3 years. Most of that's housing. Some of it's community buildings. So you're going to see more housing done, and people can go around this community of Tahlequah and see evidence of that. Parks and recreation's really important. So across from the complex is the Mankiller Park, Wilma Mankiller Park, which is coming along. There's a lot of opportunities for walking trails that we built and we need to build in the future around our government complexes and some of our lands. So those are some of the things going on. You can go a short distance from here, though, and see an example of early childhood education investment, which is going on across the reservation. But here in Tahlequah, you can see it in the form of our flagship Head Start being replaced with a new multi-million-dollar facility. Those are good long-term investments as well. I mentioned the hospital already, but my goodness, that is a $450 million investment. That'll be the single biggest investment that we've made as a tribe in terms of the price tag of that investment ever, and it's huge. But we need it. We need to grow. So all these things, I think, are meant to meet the needs we have now and hopefully meet them into the future.
That's one of the things that really impresses me as you were talking, Chief, is, there's a lot of construction going on right around the complex area, but it's also matched at the same pace in communities like Kenwood, Marble City, and Salina that are getting tens of millions of dollars of investments to engage citizens where they are. And so it's not just Tahlequah, but it's also across the reservation, and it's based on need and trying to meet the needs of those citizens in those areas.
Yeah.
So in a perfect world full of unlimited funding and resources, what is one thing that could be put into motion to most benefit Indian country?
That is an important and difficult question. If I had to pick one, and that's a very unfair question, by the way. Should have said it's also unfair. I probably full funding of health and wellness programs, because if you could make health and wellness within reach of everybody, you got a better shot of doing the whole host of other things in Indian country that you want to achieve and what we want to achieve in the Cherokee Nation.
Mr. Enlow, good luck.
Wow. No pressure. As you asked that question, I really thought, go back to our history, and I agree with Chief. I think my historic perspective would be, I'd really like to see us have the state of Sequoia.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's just, personally, I think it'd be really cool for us to fulfill that vision. I could see the language being carried about and self-determination on another level. That would be really cool for us to go back to that environment. And again, that's if money was no object.
Yeah.
It'd be difficult to reach that point, but I could see it. It'd be a pretty cool place.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
I was kidding. But I know you guys are really busy, so we are going to try to wrap this up. Chief, pretend we're 20 years into the future. What do you hope your legacy will be at the Cherokee Nation?
Well, I'll be 70, and I hope I'm still toddling around the complex.
Full circle.
Full circle. I hope that the things we've been able to do the past 5 years, and then we've got a few years left, that you can still see evidence of not only the different things that it is, but that it's gone way beyond geographically, in terms of funding, in terms of impact, anything I ever imagined, because that's what we're doing. We're just building on our predecessors. One of the things that I hope, as an example, that is true about is the language. We're making the biggest language investment that we've ever made in terms of sheer dollars and number of programs. In 20 years, when I'm 70, I hope that I see the evidence that worked. I think it will, and it works if people are speaking the language in this complex, in this wonderful building we're in, and in our communities more than they are now, that we're replacing speakers.
To leave on a lighter note, we're going to have a little fun before we let you go. Let's end this good discussion with a fun little lightning round. Do you want to take the first one?
Yeah. Okay, this is a very important one. Fry bread or hog fry?
Hog fry.
Fry bread. I'm always a sucker for some honey on my fry bread, and my daughter makes some beautiful fry bread.
Okay, night owl or morning person?
Night owl.
I've switched to a morning person.
You're showing your age a little bit.
I might be.
Favorite genre of music?
I'd say classic rock.
Probably alternative rock.
I see you in that Subaru blasting some alternative rock.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of EDM as well.
Yeah. Favorite Cherokee National Holiday event?
The parade. Absolutely.
Stickball. I absolutely love playing a good game of stickball and watching.
One last one. Favorite quote you live by?
That's a tough one. It'd probably be a Todd Enlow quote.
Is it a dad joke?
I'll tell you the quote that has been on my mind the most recently. It's Robert F. Kennedy quoting someone else. You know, some men see the world as it is and say why, or ask why, and I see the world as it is and ask why not. And I think that's what we're doing at the Cherokee Nation, is we're looking at the world and seeing challenges and not letting that stop us. We're imagining the world as it could be. And that's something that I think helps inform a lot of what we do in our administration.
Mr. Enlow.
Some years ago, I gave a leadership presentation to several schools, and I was using movies to try and teach leadership principles. In this one particular, I traveled to Veneta, and the chief at the time couldn't attend, so I wound up being his proxy. And so, they were expecting filet mignon, and they've got a B-choice grade of chopped beef that day. But I used one of my favorite movies, which was Shawshank Redemption. Counselor Hoskin at the time was in the room. He came up and said, that's one of my favorite movies as well. And, that was kind of cool the way you did that. That movie being one of my favorites, and it's Morgan Freeman's characters, and the line is, get busy living or get busy dying. That goes back to a sense of carpe diem, but it's in a more current sense of, it's really about seizing the day and taking advantage of what you've got. I love the stories in that movie and the principles that go along with it, tying it back to one of the first times I actually got to know Chief outside of the council chambers. And so I remember that night very well.
Back in the day.
Awesome.
Well, this has been a great podcast. I really appreciate you both being here and talking with us today.
Yeah, appreciate your leadership, and we'll let you get back to your busy Monday. But thank you for coming in, and we really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
I'm sorry we butchered the lightning round.
Siyo from the Rez was recorded at the W.W. Keeler Tribal Complex in Tahlequah on the Cherokee Nation Reservation.
This episode was hosted by Kinley Keys and Colton Brandstetter.
Our producer is Brian Dugan.
Our podcast art was designed by Justine Eating.
This episode was edited by Samantha Robinson.
Soundtrack by Chuge Mackey.
If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe and leave a review. It'll help more people find us. Please share this episode with your family and friends, especially some of our elders who may not be on social media or listen to podcasts.
And don't forget to follow Cherokee Nation on social media for podcast updates and behind-the-scenes content.
And be sure to check back for future episodes of Siyo from the Rez everywhere you listen to podcasts, because we have some exciting guests lined up.
Until next time, stay connected, watch out for one another, and Siyo from the Rez.
Slowly under darkland, got to Yohin, OGC Donailan, COJ Dohan.